The moment was supposed to be a celebration. My father, his hand proudly resting on my brother's shoulder, turned to the table and with a wide grin announced, "Your brother will take over now." My heart sank, but I smiled. I had spent 12 years building Harper & Company into what it was, a $75 million national powerhouse. And just like that, in a single sentence, it seemed to all come crumbling down. But I wasn't going to let him see the impact his words had on me, not yet. The dining room buzzed with conversations, glasses clinking, business associates laughing in the background. I should have been proud. This was the moment we'd all worked toward, the pinnacle of our success. But it didn't feel like a victory. It felt like a betrayal. Harper & Company had started small, a logistics firm my father founded when I was just a child. I watched him struggle through sleepless nights, chasing contracts and making sacrifices to keep the business afloat. But when I turned 24, fresh out of business school, I earned my chance. I fought for it. And once I stepped in, I didn't just help, it was my efforts that transformed the company. Yet none of it mattered now. My father had already made his decision. I glanced at Ethan, my brother. He had never cared about the company. His ventures were full of failures, his interests always elsewhere. Logistics, operations, no, power, yes, that's what he wanted. But now, he was being handed the throne, as if all my years of sweat, strategy, and sacrifice had been meaningless. I swallowed the bile rising in my throat, forcing a smile. I raised my glass. "To Ethan," I said, my voice smooth but cold. The guests raised their glasses, oblivious to the storm swirling beneath my calm exterior. Across the table, my mother met my eyes. I could tell she understood, but she never interfered. She never did. My father, however, was still basking in the glow of his decision, completely unaware that it had just set something into motion. Ethan met my gaze, the corner of his mouth twitching into a smirk. That was when I realized this wasn't just my father's decision. Ethan had been waiting for this. He'd positioned himself as the obedient son, doing just enough to make sure this moment happened, and my father, ever the traditionalist, saw no flaw in the logic. A son should inherit the empire. A daughter? Well, that was never in the cards, but they underestimated me. That night, sleep didn't come easily. My mind raced, replaying every sacrifice I had made, the missed birthdays, the broken relationships, the nights I spent alone, working through problems they never even knew existed. This company was my blood, my sweat, my life, and they expected me to walk away from it without a fight. By 3 a.m., I was in my home office, reviewing every contract, every share agreement. While they had been busy with their family dinners and their show of power, I had been securing something far more important: control. At 8:45 a.m. the next day, I walked into Harper & Company headquarters. Everything looked the same, but I knew today wasn't business as usual. Today was war. The reception area was quiet, the kind of quiet that signals something's coming. The employees exchanged glances as I walked by, unsure of where their hot loyalty would land. They had already heard the rumors, but I didn't acknowledge them. I had nothing to prove to them anymore. I knew where my power lay. I entered my office, closed the door behind me, and sat down at my desk. I had exactly 15 minutes before my father and Ethan walked in, believing they were stepping into their new roles as CEO and heir apparent. I exhaled and powered up my computer. The screen flashed with files, documents I'd studied countless times over the years. I opened one in particular, the Executive Shareholders Agreement, the one they had no idea existed, the one that would change everything. At precisely 9 a.m., the door knocked sharply. I didn't respond. The door swung open, and in they walked my father with the regal air of a king, Ethan with the smug confidence of someone who thought the fight was already won. "Lisa," my father began, his voice dripping with authority. "I assume you're aware of the transition happening today." "Transition," I repeated, feigning confusion. Interesting choice of words. Ethan's smirk deepened, but I didn't flinch. "You'll need to help Ethan get familiar with the operations," my father continued. "We'll need you to step aside." I leaned back in my chair, letting the words sink in. "Move on," I echoed. "Dad, I think you're mistaken about something." His face darkened. "Lisa, this isn't up for debate. We've already made our decision." I smiled, a slow, knowing smile. "Oh, I know, Dad. The thing is, you don't have the authority to make that decision." Ethan scoffed. "Don't make this difficult, Lisa. We're doing this the easy way." I didn't respond. Instead, I pressed a button on the remote control. The large screen behind me flickered to life, displaying the very document I'd been reviewing. The Executive Shareholders Agreement, signed by my father, my brother, and me. My father's face paled. "Do you even know what this is, Ethan?" I asked, turning to my brother. "It's a shareholder agreement, and it clearly states that any transfer of power, like making someone CEO, requires the approval of all majority shareholders." I paused, letting that sink in. "Dad, I hold 60% of the company's shares." The room fell silent. My father's jaw clenched. Ethan turned pale, his face drained of all color. You can't do this," he stammered. "Dad, tell her she can't do this." My father said nothing. "I've been securing my place here for years, Ethan," I continued, standing up. "When we needed capital in 2017, you signed over 15% of your shares to me in exchange for my investment. In 2019, when we had that legal battle, you signed over another 10% as collateral. Add that to my original 35%, and you get 60%. I'm the majority shareholder." Ethan looked at the documents, his hands shaking. You can't just take everything." I leaned in, my voice low and controlled. "I'm not taking anything. I'm just keeping what's already mine." Ethan's face twisted with anger, but there was nothing he could say. He knew I was right. My father knew it too. This wasn't his company anymore. It was mine. "Lisa," my father finally spoke, his voice tight. "You're making a mistake. A family should stick together. Do you really want to burn this bridge?" I met his gaze, unwavering. "Dad, you burned this bridge the moment you made your decision without me." The silence that followed was suffocating. Ethan still held the legal documents, his fingers white from gripping them too tightly. My father stood rigid, his expression unreadable, but I knew he was calculating, trying to find a way out. There was none. "I'm offering you both a choice," I said, my voice smooth, professional. "You can stay in the company. But Ethan," I turned to him, "you won't be CEO. You'll take an advisory role with limited authority, or you can leave. I'll buy out your shares at market value." Ethan's face twisted with fury, but he couldn't argue. He knew. He was beaten. My father knew it too. Finally, my father spoke, his voice quiet. "I never thought you'd do this. Not to your own family." A month later, Harper & Company had transformed. The old board members who'd aligned with my father and Ethan were gone, and those who had questioned my leadership were replaced. The company, once strong under my guidance, was now truly mine. With control came new opportunities, initiatives. My father had rejected industries he'd been too cautious to explore. Within 6 months, profits soared. Within a year, we surpassed $100 million. For the first time, I wasn't just fighting to prove my worth. I was fighting to build something untouchable. A year after the upheaval, I met my father for dinner. He had retired, and the animosity between us had faded. He looked different, quieter, accepting. "I read about the latest deal you closed," he said. "It was a smart move." I smirked, slightly. "I know." He lifted his glass. "To Harper and Company." When I clinked my glass with his, there was no anger or resentment, only peace. I had already won. I no longer needed his approval to know it. Now, sitting in my office overlooking the empire I built, I reflect on the journey. I've learned that family can be your greatest enemy. Loyalty is earned and power is never given. It's taken. Most importantly, I've learned that the best way to prove your worth is to stop seeking validation and build something so strong they can never ignore you again. Harper and Company is mine now, and I will ensure no one forgets that.